Darkness swallows everything it touches. Even with the light of the moon spilling into my tiny one-bedroom apartment, the darkness feasts insatiably. The thickness in the air makes it damn near impossible to breathe. Tiny slips of air only serve as a reminder of how dire the situation is. Is this it? Is this how I die? I should be able to feel the hardwood floor beneath my feet, but there's nothing but sinking. The space is getting tighter around me like hands around my throat, squeezing, dampness on my forehead, involuntarily pulling a gentle, confused swipe from my left hand. Is it hot in here? Is here even here anymore? I no longer hear the usually welcome distraction of TV noise. No music, no voices of invited friends, just what should be silence. But there is no silence. The thoughts are loud, ever shifting, ever moving. I can't grab a hold of one to process. I can't think straight. I can feel the fingers of my right hand grip tightly around my iPhone, my lifeline, my thumb aimlessly searching. But there's no one to call. There's nowhere to go. And what would they say? What could stop the darkness? What would stop the sinking? Any relief would and has always been temporary. Here in the dark silence, there is no more running, no more distraction, and no more drowning out the pain. There's no justifications, rationalizations, or excuses. Here in the ever-engulfing darkness, I have to face myself. My thoughts become a twisted house of mirror reflecting back to me all of my trauma, my toxic habits, my abusive behaviors. In the screaming silence, I have to address my imperfections and the cyclical pattern. In this place where I want to break free from my skin, there is nowhere to go. There is no running from the triggers of past traumas I thought I had escaped unscathed. No hiding and no avoiding. Here is where you accept death so that you can live. Thank you for joining me, Bobby Lee, today on Absolutely Raggedy. I would say within the last, maybe 7 or so years, I've heard the term ego death used a lot. Um, and first of all, y'all know me. I'm going to throw out a definition here so we're all working on the same definition of the word. So today I'm going with ego death is a complete loss of subjective self-identity. I know that oftentimes it's related to either drug, or I've heard it related to drugs, or higher forms of meditation, etc. But I remember the first time I feel like I personally dealt with ego death, and it was not from either one of those situations. It really came from life whooping my ass consistently for years. So I remember my car got stolen in 2021, and I remember the day that it happened so clearly. So first of all, my car wasn't stolen. It was carjacked from my friend. So I think my friend came over my house at maybe like, I don't remember what time it was, but it was early morning. So maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And so I just hear this knocking on my door. And obviously I'm discombobulated because I was knocked out. I open the door. My friend is standing there with his boyfriend. And, he's like, and he's saying it very matter of factly because I think he was just, empty. But he told me that they had stole his car. They pulled a gun on him and stole his car. And I remember feeling so overwhelmed that I just started laughing. Like I laughed loud, like big open, wide mouth, obnoxious laugh, which I'm sure kind of threw my friend off because he had just had a gun pulled on him, which is not funny. But I was just so it didn't seem real. I was like, what the hell? And then and then I remember that literally either the day right before that or the day before that, so maybe 2 days before. I really think it was the day right before. But I was dating someone that, I really care about. To this day, we're still cool. After all of this stuff died down and we were able to get to a place of friendship, was still cool. But at the time, we had gotten into this huge argument. And it was one of those arguments that, one, I knew shifted our relationship, because we weren't the type to, he was like one of the few people that I could just talk to, and we wouldn't have arguments. And he would be like, we have a level of respect for each other. We just don't talk to each other a certain way. So once we had this argument, I knew that the relationship was different, on both ends, because the respect was out the window. And my hand was still swollen. My right hand was swollen because y'all, we had been arguing. We weren't even in we were arguing over the phone. So I was home and I was slamming my fist up against the side of my hand up against the wall because I was screaming, y'all. I don't even know what the argument was about, but I was screaming, slamming my hand up against the wall. So my hand is swollen. 2 days later, my hand's still swollen. And I remember, this was just another thing gone wrong, and a line of things continuously going wrong, like I said, for years and years and years. And I had nothing else. I was done. I was tired. And when you're in that mode, you're in survival mode, you have these different things that you use to distract you. For me, it was weed. It was company. It was, I always had somebody at my house. My friends were always there, or I was always with the guy that I was dating at the time, at his house. There was never time for me to be alone. And coming off of 2021, it kind of just, not coming off of 2021, but coming out of 2020, it felt like the natural way, because everybody had just been so isolated for so long. So when we were just getting back into, going into people's houses and going outside, it didn't seem like I was using it to distract myself from what was starting to, 2020, I've said this plenty of times, 2020 was a good year for me as far as being opened up emotionally and being opened up mentally and having a lot of clarity about things that I've struggled with my entire life. But on the flip side of that, when you are being opened up, it's like you're raw, right? So your skin is exposed, you're out there. And when you've had tough skin all your life, because you've been able to kind of block these things out and block these traumas and how they have affected you out, you're not a healed person. You're just somebody who is just not dealing and processing. And that's been my way since I was young. And we'll get to it in a second, but I remember my mom made this comment, and it hit me like, oh, I really have been this way my whole life before I even really knew, how I was maneuvering and why I was maneuvering in that way. So weed, sex, spending time with friends, chasing relationships, the pursuit of love was a very big distraction for me as well, which is, we'll talk about that in another episode. But it just had gotten to a point where all of these things that had been working as distractions and had been working as escape were no longer working. I had developed a tolerance to my own vices. And so I remember, after my friend and his boyfriend left, I laid in bed for days after that. I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't call anybody. I was done. I was done. And in the silence is where things really started to rise up. And I don't know at what moment I knew there was no fighting this, there was no more running away from this, but all of these memories started just coming back, just started flooding back into my head. Like I had subconsciously packed away all of this stuff in these neat little boxes in my head to protect myself, as a way to, keep myself from going, I don't know, crazy maybe, I don't know. But I had, it was like somebody putting like a magnifying glass, or the first time you put your glasses on and you realize this whole time you thought that you could see well, but when you put the glasses on, you're like, oh, this is what seeing actually is. And this was like one of those moments, and it was like my eyes were open to a lot of the behaviors, because now my mind is racing and running through all of these different memories that I'm having, all of this subconsciousness coming to the top, right? And now my repetitive behaviors, behaviors, right? Not anybody else's, that I have justified because I've been in survival mode, or trauma, that I had named because I just thought, and I think everybody does this, I thought it wasn't big enough or bad enough, and other people have situations that are way worse. And man, but it's like, I don't know, you get used to downplaying your trauma so you don't seem a certain type of way, so you don't come off, or because you don't remember it, right? And so first of all, I'm going to say it again, trigger warning. So we're about to get into some SA talk a little bit, so please listen with care. When I was really young, somebody close to my family decided to sexually assault me. And this is something I've always known about. It's come up in conversation before, and I've been pretty open about it. And so in growing up, I really thought that was something that hadn't really affected me, because one, even though I've always, like I said, I've always known that it happened, but it seemed like something that I saw in a movie, or that happened in a movie. It didn't seem like something that happened to me. And in 2020, I started to recognize and realize how much was stolen from me before I was ever really a full person, and how now there's a burden placed on me that I don't understand. And a lot of people don't understand, even people that have been through similar things, people that remember, people that are older that have been. You don't understand how it affects you and how it shifts you. And in that darkness, in that moment, I had to really come to terms with how much of my personality was because of what happened to me. How my relationships were affected by that, how I would have trust issues and attachment issues and issues with self-worth and hypersexuality and issues with affection and being vulnerable and being intimacy issues. Like, I really had to accept that this thing shifted me, this person shifted me. In all of these different ways that I just had attributed to, this is just how I am, or this is just how relationships are. Relationships are just, volatile and up and down, and there's good and bad, and this is just how it is. And what's actually crazy is the guy that I had been dating in 2021 that we got into that huge argument. He was the one that kind of let me see Relationships don't have to this is not healthy, and these are just repetitive patterns that we've seen from previously unhealthy relationships, that this was our only this was the only thing we had to go off of. These were the only type of relationships that you saw in everyday life, so this is what you thought was normal. But anyway, in that silence, I had to accept that I was an emotional abuser, that I had these very intense emotions, and that I used that to intensify emotions in relationships because, again, that's what felt normal to me. It's crazy too because, like, okay, when you realize, when you're going through this moment, and I don't know if everybody has this moment where it happens kind of like this cumulative moment. Cumulative. Am I saying that right? But you have this like cumulative moment. Hold on, y'all. I don't feel like, is that the right word? Cumulative. Increasing or increased in quantity, degree, or force by successive additions. I mean, yeah, that is what I'm trying to say. Cumulative. Cumulative? Cumulative. Oh my God. I'm leaving this in. Anyway. Tickled. Anyway, I don't know if everybody experiences this cumulative, I'm going to say it again, cumulative moment, where these cumulative moments where everything is opening up your eyes at the same time, because it was very intense, and I assume probably very emotionally overwhelming to the place of being probably harmful to, because this is the other thing too, I feel like if 2020 hadn't put me in the right headspace, had I had this moment prior to that, it would have been very scary, and I think that I probably would have I wouldn't have been able to deal with it the way that I was able to deal with it, in a healthy way of like really seeing what's happening. And I guess that's obvious because prior to that, I would be able to escape with, the vices and whatnot. But in the darkness and in that silence, what I noticed about trauma, or what I've noticed about my trauma, is it took a lot of the things that are naturally myself, they're naturally my personality, and it perverted those things. And now I'm using these things that would be naturally my gifts, and I'm using them to my own detriment. So for example, I am actually naturally a giving person. I'm naturally somebody who wants to nurture and take care of people. And in my trauma, that turned into people pleasing. You get it? And so, or even my natural, again, I'm a naturally affectionate person, but in my trauma, I just couldn't do that. I can't really be all up on you, even just hugging felt weird to me. Just hugging random, or saying I love you. And this is crazy. Saying I love you. I'll say I love you now so freely to anybody. But I remember there was a time when even my parents saying I love you felt weird. Hugs felt weird. Not necessarily from my parents, but like if I hugged my sister, that felt weird. Hugging my friends. So there's just a lot of things that were naturally myself, naturally a part of who I am, naturally a part of my personal power. Even the sex thing, I'm a naturally sexual person, but because it's been perverted through trauma, now I'm hypersexual. Now it's too much. Now that you know what I'm saying? Where you can use your sexuality for good or for evil, but that's another conversation for another day. I'm just saying that the things that were naturally a part of who I am became twisted and disgusting and perverted and you a part of the things that were now breaking me down, um, because of these different types of traumas. Um, and I, like I said, man, I started to question everything. Everything was, because it was like, is reality real? And this is where you start to have like these I started to have like these out of body experiences where I just could not tell what was actually reality. And it makes you start to feel crazy, because in your head, you're like, this whole time, every argument I've gotten into, every time that I thought that I was right, every time that I was standing on something, standing on business, and I just knew, was I fucking crazy? This whole time, was it me? This whole, like, and when you have that moment, and there's so many things being revealed to you at once, you like, God darn. You like, damn. Because this whole time I always thought it was them, or I mostly thought it was them. Yeah, sometimes I was wrong, but not that much. You know what I mean? Or sometimes I was acting, out of emotion, and I was justified because I was mad, or it was justified because you were doing something to piss me off, and that was justified because, and it's like, nah, bro. In these moments, you realize your justifications are bullshit. Your rationalizations of your own bad, toxic behaviors are bullshit, and it feels like the world is not real. It feels like I am actually losing my shit. Am I just this like collage of trauma responses stitched together by survival? Have I just been molded by experiences, by bad experiences? And now, if that is the case, who the fuck am I? Who am I supposed to be if the person that I am is only this person? Who am I supposed to be if the person that I am, the person that I've always been, is this person, only this person, this version of myself, because of all of the bad shit that happened to me, because of all of the negative experiences, because of other people taking shit from me? Who the fuck am I? And that's a question that it haunted me for years. To this day, sometimes I have, and it happens less, but I have moments where I'm like, what the fuck is going on? What am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to be doing, y'all? Not that. But like, what am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to have in my circle? Who am I supposed to help? What is my purpose here? What am I doing? Am I making the right? Am I just a bad decision maker altogether? Can I go back and undo, not necessarily what I've done, but can I go back and undo the damage done to me? Like, how do I get from where I am now to the next place? Is there a next place? Am I redeemable? Who am I? And what I've come to understand is the fact that there are people in the world who never have these moments where they're wondering who they are, where they're reflecting on themselves, because they think 100% I know. And it's just being willing to ask the question, am I a good person? What type of person am I? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? It sets you apart from a lot of people, because asking those questions of yourself really require a level of honesty and transparency with you that is absolutely and absurdly terrifying. And it's world shifting. And it's mind boggling. And unfortunately, it melts away what you thought was reality. So it becomes a question of, is ignorance bliss or is knowledge power, right? Because when you don't know, you could just go about life doing whatever the fuck you want, and it's, hey, I don't know, I don't think that things are great over here. But when you really see the truth of everything, you have to have, first of all, mental fortitude to see like the truth and still be able to live life happy, and like to just be happy in this life, but just see it for what it truly is. And that means that there's beauty and ugly and darkness and everything, but accepting the darkness as a part of what it is and still being able to be a being of light. Everybody can't do that, unfortunately. But asking that question and being ready to at least attempt, right? Attempt to unlearn and attempt to separate what happened to me from who I am. And of course, it's not an overnight thing, right? You have to consistently do this. You have to do this in moments when you're pissed, right? When you are in the middle of an argument, you're looking at the person you arguing with, they're pissed, you're pissed, eyes wide, red, you're screaming at the top of your lungs, and you have to realize, and you have to really call yourself, is this who I am in this moment? Is this who I want to be? Do you know how hard that shit is to do? You almost have to be of two minds, right? Because you are right in this moment reacting out of emotion. You could be all the way right, but screaming and yelling and all that, you're reacting out of emotion. And we think that that's okay if we right, but it's like, you can be right and handle things in a certain way that's not screaming and yelling, because that is not normal. It's triggering as fuck. I don't like the way my body feels when I'm arguing with people like that. I don't like I literally be shaking, and then it takes time for it to die. I don't like that. Why we just can't talk? But anyway, it takes a lot to get to a place of reflection, but then you have to be ready for what comes with your eyes being opened to you, to the truth of who you are. Because even though you can say, oh yeah, I know there's no such thing as perfect, and this is the reason why you can't tell people about themselves a lot of times, because people are like, oh, I know I'm not perfect, but then you're like, oh, but you do this thing, I don't do that. Oh, okay. But you got to be willing to be like, I actually do that. And even though and the other thing too is, I don't want to get too far off this. A lot of times we'll talk about this in another episode, but a lot of times I think people think because in their mind they're not thinking maliciously. Because when I say I was an emotional abuser, in my mind I wasn't like, oh, I'm finna use my emotions to abuse this nigga. No, like in my mind I'm like, this is totally justified because I did this for you, because I love you, and if you loved me then you would. That's not justified, ma'am. That's not normal behavior. But we'll get into the depths of like that type of stuff later, because that deserves a episode all on its own. But you have to be willing to face the truth, and you have to be willing to, or I had to be willing to face the truth, and I didn't know what came with seeing. I didn't know what came with knowing. So you either have power or you have bliss, but not both, I don't think. And I don't mean that you can't have power and be happy, but you cannot have ignorant bliss and be knowledgeable. And that knowledge comes with weight, you know? But like I said, the shifting, it doesn't happen overnight. I'm still shifting a little bit every day, making sure I'm making the right decisions for the right reasons, being intentional about what I'm doing. But in quiet moments of real, true honesty, where I had to really, truly face myself and face the truth, it happened in my therapy sessions where I sat in silence because I didn't know what to say, or I sat in tears because there's no more suppressing emotions. There would be a time where I could feel like I was going to cry, but I'm not going to cry about this. Oh, I don't give no fuck. I don't care. You can't do that now because you try to act like you don't care, but the tears are on your cheeks. So anybody looking in your face is like, yes, you do fucking care. You know what I mean? But it came in words written in 100,000 journals that I have. It came in daydreaming and conversations with God, where I would ask, tell me who I am, show me the truth, and keeping my mind and my heart open for the ways that the truth was being revealed. A lot of times the truth is revealed to you. God not just always going to come down and be like, hey, you know you tripping, right? No, you are gonna go through things. Even when you ask for strength, God is going to put you through situations where you have to build your strength. You're not just gonna, it's not like playing a game where you can, it is like playing a game actually. You don't just start games and level up. Like, you don't start games with all of the power, right? No, you have to literally level up. You have to literally fight. You have to fight in battles to get strength. You have to fight in battles to get invisibility or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same thing. Like, you have to go through trials and tribulations in order to build your strength. You have to go through certain things. Certain things will happen in your life to help you build discipline. So it's just like, you have to be open and paying attention when you're asking to receive revelation in the book of Revelations. But that's that on that. Some of the things that I did I had to become intentional about embracing the darkness. I know a lot of us try to, I don't want to say a lot of us. I'm trying to do this thing where I don't speak for other people. I'm only speaking from my own experience. So if you hear me like changing the you to I, I'm trying, work with me. Bear with me. You gotta bear with me. Okay. So some of the things that I had to do in order for me to stop running from darkness, or running from my flaws, or running from my bad habits, or running from the things that aren't, favorable, and my imperfections, I had to put processes in place so that I could start to accept my shadow self, and I could recognize the ways in which I was growing and the ways in which I was using my shadow for good. So number one, I started to study my patterns. And I wouldn't do it in a way where I would like judge myself. It would just be like, okay, what is the reason that this thing in this scenario, you've had this scenario repeat itself over and over again. So what is it about this scenario that is making you feel away? And when I did this, and I've talked about this before, I really only focused on my actions. So if there was a situation where I was, going at it with a person, and I'm trying to think of specifics, and if I can, I'm not going to get caught up on it, but if there was a situation where I was into it with a person, I would go look back on that situation. And initially, the first time I would go over the situation, my mind always wants to be like, oh, well, what they did this, and because they did this, I did that in response. However, I had to realize that my response, regardless of what they are doing, is a reflection of who I am. So I can't put my responses and my reactions on other people. Now, there are situations that really provoke you out of your body, but what you do is what you are capable of doing. They're not separate things. You know what I'm saying? So I can't be like, oh, I would have never done this, but I did it. And regardless of the outside circumstances. So for example, if I kill somebody, regardless of the circumstances, I am capable of murder. Or I would have never done this if they hadn't done that. Even if I feel like that's justified, my actions are still my own. You get what I'm saying? So I had to take out justification and only focus on myself. Even if this person called me a bitch and tried to kick me out, if my reaction was to call her a bitch back and now we're going back and forth, instead of being like, you know what, I'm out of here. That's what I wanted to work on, because I had to decide who I wanted to be and move in that manner and study my actions and reactions based on how I am now versus the person I want to be in the future, or the person I'm becoming. Would that person have handled these things like this once I figure out why I'm so triggered by whatever the thing is, right? The second thing that I had to do, or that I did, was I started to name things as they were and name how I feel. So if I felt sad about something, I'm not saying, well, I don't give a fuck, I don't care. No, this hurts my feelings. I had to be honest about it. I was enraged. I was hurt. I was confused. I was feeling anxious. I was misunderstanding. I had to stop sugarcoating and performing, oh, I'm cool. Because you can't you can't identify, you know what I'm saying, and change shit if you're not able to name it. And I'm also going to make another, I want to talk about it. I want to, in an episode, talk about how we as a society kind of have a problem with saying things as what they are and how detrimental that can be to your growth. But yeah, being clear about how you feel, even if it doesn't feel good to say that, even if it doesn't feel good to feel that. I had to build rituals. So when things got heavy, or when they got to the point where I felt like, ooh, this is so heavy, I'm suffocating. I'm about to go back into old habits. I'm about to go be in the bed for days and not talk. I'm about to call off of work and let this mess with my money. Or at the time I wasn't even, at the time I was mostly driving for a living, so when my car got stolen, it was like a big deal. But instead of going back into your shell and going back into the bad habits, I had to start with a ritual. So in 2021, I was getting back into the yoga, and I was boxing. So that boxing was happening at 5:00 in the morning. So I had a ritual of getting up, making myself a little something to eat. It might be an egg, it might be an apple, grab some water, get dressed and go fight, go get that energy off of you. But it could be anything. Sometimes I feel myself, and I just saw this is so weird, I just saw a reel, or it may have been a TikTok, but it was saying how sometimes people with ADHD, or maybe it was an autistic person, sometimes I see autism stuff and I relate to it, but it was saying how they like pressure on their body gives them some type of grounding. And I realized that this is gonna sound so weird, but sitting on the floor also does. So when things started to get heavy, I would sit on the floor and I would tense my muscles to create fake pressure. I actually still do it. If you are ever with me and you just randomly start paying, look at my legs, you'll see I'm tensing my legs, because I just like the pressure, that feeling. But especially if I'm feeling anxious, or trying to keep myself in the moment and trying to keep myself from daydreaming or anything like that. But anyway, just like a little tiny ritual, light incense. Oh yeah, I used to light incense all the time. Incense really helped. I would say things like when I started to feel that heaviness, I would say things out loud. So I would be like, nope, I'm not even finna let you do that. We're not finna do that today. Going on about your business. So I would literally, like the way I'm saying it now, I would literally be saying it out loud. So, because sometimes the silence is the enemy's best friend. And it can distort things. I also had to allow myself, I had to allow myself to understand that it's okay to be sad for the person I was and the things that I had to do in survival mode, and make peace with that and not be so hard on myself, not be so judgmental, and also make peace with the fact that there are parts of my life that could have been different if other people had not done certain things and other people had done certain things. And if I hadn't done certain things and if I had handled a lot of situations better, things wouldn't have gotten a lot worse. So it's like, because I have this knowledge, now I have to make peace with the fact that there's a whole nother life out there that could have been mine had certain situations not happened. And it's okay to grieve that and let it go, not hold on to it and gripe. And so I had to give myself permission to be sad about what I lost. Be sad about what I didn't get to have for whatever reason. But then release it. I had to also release that shit. And then I had to start celebrating what was progress, even if it felt uncomfortable. So any moment that I'm feeling that heat in my body rising, so I know I'm getting anxious, and I know with anxiety comes irritation. So I know whatever comes out of my mouth, even if I don't mean it to, is gonna sound a certain way. So in those moments when I'm taking a moment to breathe instead of just responding, baby, that's progress. And even though you're the only one doing this in those arguments, the other person is not doing it. They're still arguing. They're still yelling. And you're just like, listen, give me a second. Like, regardless of what they're doing, this is progress. And even though it feels like you may be losing an argument or you may be losing, you're not losing. So I had to really give myself permission and be celebratory about that. You're not falling victim or falling into the same patterns just because this person is stuck where they are, right? Or just because this situation is what it is. I also had to accept that, and this is part of celebrating uncomfortable progress, but when it was time to move on, and this was the other thing, I always thought that when it was time to move on from certain situations or certain people, even jobs and stuff, I would feel done with it. Oh, I'm over with this. I'm done. So now it's time to move on. And I would stick around in situations until I felt that, because I knew it was coming. So another part of the uncomfortable progress was moving on, even though still being and feeling attached to something. I feel sad. I miss this person. And I would take missing them as meaning, oh, this is not over. Baby, it's over. Miss them from your own crib. Miss them from your side of the world. Miss that situation. Miss that job from another job. You can miss something, you can still love something, you can still want something and walk away from it, and that is okay. That is still progress, and that should be celebrated. And it doesn't have to feel good for it to count. It doesn't have to feel good for it to matter. And, you know, these are just things that really helped me to move from one version of myself up to the next, and really do so with as much grace and as much love for myself as possible. Because while I was unlearning, or am still unlearning, but in the beginning, when it was really, you know, a new process, I really had to understand that even though a lot of this stuff is not my fault, a lot of this stuff is happenstance of life, but that is life, right? And life is not always fair, and life is not something you can always control. But just being okay with, this is the first time you've done this. You don't have a blueprint, because as much as you love the people around you, a lot of the people around you are also not healthy people. And that doesn't mean that they were abusive and things like that, but you think that the way that you're reacting is normal because that's what you've always seen. But then when you go in other spaces and you have your own clarity, you realize these are not normal behaviors. These are just perpetuated behaviors in my family, or in the Black community, or in the church, or whatever, at work. You get what I'm saying? But anyway, so yes, study your patterns. Be honest about how you feel. Build rituals or things that help keep you from falling too far back when things start to get heavy. Let yourself mourn the version of you had to be to survive, and celebrate your uncomfortable progresses. Well, we're at the end, friend. And as usual, take what you need. Leave the rest on the floor like the clothes you were supposed to wash last week. Healing does not always come dressed up in clarity and calm. Sometimes it shows up in sweatpants, crust from yesterday, whispering, "Try again." Sometimes progress is ugly, crying at 2 a.m. and still choosing not to text that toxic ex. Growth. You won't always feel brave or wise, but showing up, ragged edges, shaky voice, deep sighs and all, that counts. So take a deep breath, or a nap, or a walk. Take the truth even when it stings, and take that tiny win you almost ignored because it didn't look like a big enough breakthrough. Take your messy, sacred, non-linear healing. Take what you need, because you're becoming. And becoming, well, that's holy work. Thanks for coming. Bye.